Hello and welcome to the FHA Insider Podcast, where we sit down with food and beverage and hospitality's movers and shakers to discuss trends, current affairs, and industry buzz. Today we're here with Nicole Chew, Director of Marketing Communications of the JW Marriott Hotel, CEO of Chope, Ariff Ziaudeen, and Kevin Cheng, Founder and Director of Kaigai Fine Wine Asia and Wine and Whisky. Welcome guys, and thank you for taking the time to chat with us.
Happy to be here.
All right, so the three of you are currently working in arguably, three of the hardest hit industries since the pandemic sent the world into lockdown. People are essentially like the core of your business, and I think it's going to be really interesting to find out how you've sort of pivoted your strategies to cope with COVID when all of these hit people are stuck at home. So I'm personally familiar with what you guys do. Like I literally make like all my reservations on Chope.
Thank you.
I've not yet stayed at JW Marriott, but I've dined at the restaurants. Like I love cool pets. And yeah, it's a really, really cool place. And like most of the world, I've been ordering like a ton of wine online. But for the sake of those who maybe are not so familiar, could we just quickly go around the table and introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about the nature of your business and what you do. So ladies first, Nicole.
Hi everybody, my name is Nicole, and thanks for having me. I'm the Director of Marketing Communications at the JW Marriott Singapore South Beach. So essentially my role is to look after all areas of marketing communications, from the hotel to the F&B side to the wellness side, as well as MICE and event space. So fairly large portfolio. I have to say it's been very interesting since even before Circuit Breaker all the way through Circuit Breaker to end of Circuit Breaker. So pretty excited to share a little bit about how innovative, or we've been trying to be innovative about things.
Very curious to hear a bit more. Ariff?
Hi, everybody. My name is Ariff Ziaudeen. I'm the CEO and founder of Chope. We are a dining platform and app across Singapore, Hong Kong, Thailand, Indonesia, and China. We help diners make reservations, get great deals, and now take deliveries at home.
Cool. And Kevin, you're dialing in. I understand that you're dialing in from Japan.
Yes, I'm stuck in Japan right now. I guess not in a bad way, but hi everyone. My name is Kevin. I'm the founder and managing director of F&B, a lifestyle business in Singapore and Tokyo. Singapore, we have a number of businesses, mostly within F&B. So we have some beer bars, but mostly I'm focused on wine and whiskey in Singapore, which is a fine wine and whiskey distributor. We work with restaurants and also with individuals there. Similarly, we have a business in Tokyo called Kaigai Fine Wines. It's a import and distribution business for wine as well. We target mostly restaurants in Tokyo and around Japan, and we also run a number of fine wine auctions every year in Tokyo.
Cool. Okay, so I'm gonna just start with that. Very interesting. I would be very interested to know how this works now that everyone is at home, and obviously auctions, they are it's an in-person thing and you would tend to do it live. So how does that work now that people are not allowed to gather?
It's interesting because for the auction industry in general, a lot of companies have moved into a more digital space over the past 5 or 10 years already, the likes of Christie's and Sotheby's. But Japan being quite a more traditional society, they prefer a lot more of the personal touch, and people do show up in large numbers to our live auctions. So our last one was supposed to be in April, but obviously because of COVID, we weren't able to hold that. And we've kind of adapted our model to be a bit more online focused, and we're hosting regular online auctions now as a result of that. And it's actually been quite popular because people spending a lot more time at home and they're looking for things to do, wines to buy, and as we can deliver within Japan, it still works quite well for us.
Speaking about staying at home, Nicole, how does that work for a hotel since people are not able to stay to do bookings? Tourism has gone down. I read somewhere that it's we're looking at 20% occupancy across the entire hotel industry in Singapore. So what have you guys been doing, or what are some challenges that you faced?
I think 20% is a blessing, to be honest. I think recently, until we became a FHN hotel, I think we were living off about 10 to 15%, and I think a lot of the hotels as well. I think right now, the biggest challenge is just finding opportunities to still drive revenue. So food and beverage obviously has still continued to be one of the platforms that have have been supposedly in demand. So I guess right now we've been really just busy trying to see how we can innovate and trying to reach out to the audience and have a piece of the pie compared to everybody else that's kind of doing the same thing, right? We're not really focusing too much on the hotel and the room side. I think if anything, it's just driving engagement and awareness through our social platforms and through our direct marketing, just to make sure that we're always kind of engaging with them, letting people know that we're still here, we're reminding them who we are, and trying to see how we can keep that open communication going on. But F&B, I think, has taken about 85% of our time, and it's a lot through driving on digital. I know that I use Chope quite often as well, so it's not just using like Grab, for example, because I think a lot of the times when the circuit breaker kind of happened, everybody just kind of ran towards Grab and Food Panda and whatnot. But I think it was you need to widen your scope, right? So I really enjoyed like working with Chope so far, because I know they've integrated to doing a lot of delivery and a lot of takeaways, and they're doing a lot of CSR with like tech, with SMRT and everything, which is great. And then on top of that, we've also innovated to see how else we can kind of give the same experience to the audience or to our guests from through delivery, right? So one of the things that we recently launched a few weeks ago was this virtual dining experience, where you don't just order food that gets sent to your place. When food gets sent to your place, you can actually have a restaurant experience in the comfort of your own home. So we use like virtual platforms like Zoom or Google Meet, and then you have a host, you have a bartender that does a DIY session with you, and you're making it at home in the comfort and safety of your own home. And then obviously you have the chef who comes out to talk to you about a little bit about the meal, engage with you. So I think these are the things that we've been just trying to continuously innovate, so that it gives people something to do as well, rather than just, okay, we order food, we eat, we cook, and then that's kind of what's been happening.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. I'd be very curious to try. We'll come back to that in a little bit. So Ariff, over to you. So food and dining, now that people aren't able to go out and they're not able to make reservations and go and dine, what has Chope been doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think along with the rest of the restaurant industry that we serve, we've had to very quickly set up a delivery operation, right? So we know that about 40 to 50% of the restaurants that we work with today on delivery, prior to circuit breaker, had never done delivery. So it isn't the case that restaurants were simply ramping this up. A lot of us had to launch this from scratch. In our case, as Nicole said, we've had the good fortune to connect with various stakeholders in the industry, most notably some of the pools of drivers who also are facing problems because they don't have passengers to send, right? Everybody's working from home. And so we're working with drivers, for example, from SMRT and from BYD and other taxi companies and private hire companies, to enable those guys to do food deliveries. The restaurants also get a more affordable sort of logistics arm to support them. And I think it's a win-win so far. And that's something that we've really been focused on since the circuit breaker came into effect in April.
It's very nice to hear like actually the community is kind of like banding together and just making the best out of like this situation. Kevin, so I have a question for you. So you mentioned the online wine auction business. Like, how has that been actually, like in terms of your engagement? Like, do people still, because I assume that you guys are doing like expensive fine wines, right? Are people comfortable like placing bids on high-end wines when they're not there in person? Like, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
I think it's interesting because a lot of our wines are focused on kind of old wines, rare wines, and especially now there's a lot of fake wines out there, wines that have come from questionable sources. But we see that a lot of people, they seem to be okay with working online, especially in Japan, because I think there's a certain type of trust, especially in this country, in Japan right now, because people have bought these wines from respectable places. They've stored them well, and we've seen quite a successful past couple of months of auctions, actually, because people seem to be willing to take the risk and actually do some research. We post photos online. We post notes on wines, and if people want to see the bottles, we're also able to get the warehouse to take photos, send it to them, and we've even had people take these virtual tours using Zoom to inspect the bottles. For example, if someone wants to see in detail how a label looks like, they can get online with one of our staff or one of the people from the warehouse and literally walk through 10 or 15 wines from the comfort of their home. And I think that so far it seems to be working. And similarly for the distribution side of things, I've seen in Singapore and also in Tokyo, people are very, propensity for them to really commit to buying seems to be actually higher than before. In the past, people would have a look at lists and take some time to think about it. But now I think people have if they're out to buy something online, they have I wouldn't say a mission, but kind of a purpose to actually do that. And they commit quicker than I would have expected.
Okay, it's kind of like wanting that immediate like satisfaction, because everyone's like, would you say it's because everyone's just like stuck at home and you just want to be able to have something to comfort yourself?
And then I guess one of the side effects of staying at home for some, especially, I'm not sure if you're aware, but in Tokyo, actually businesses have, some of them have closed, but a lot of them are continuing as per normal. And so people's livelihoods in terms of incomes haven't changed significantly for a lot of people, especially in this middle to upper income bracket that we target. So for them, actually working from home gives them a lot more, that they're spending less money out at restaurants, but they're still looking to spend some money to enjoy their life.
Good to know that people are still taking the time to do that despite everything. It has certainly been many months of a lot of challenges. And I would want to ask you guys, what is the biggest challenge you think you have faced, and how did you address it? Feel free to jump in.
Sure, this is Ariff. I think for us, it's been the uncertainty. Looking back to when all this started in sort of late Jan, early Feb, if we knew then what we know now about the duration of this, the lockdowns, obviously we'd have approached it very differently. But I think at the time we were spending a lot of time trying to calibrate our response based on what we knew. So we expected initially, maybe this would be a slight drop in business, but Singapore would never lock down. Things look like they're under control. And then we expected when it dropped, it would bounce back. And so every week almost we're calibrating our response, and it becomes very difficult to think about the long-term vision for building a business or building a brand in that moment. And it's exhausting, because it takes its toll on your day-to-day sort of operations. You have to sort of, you're always on your feet, right? There are new challenges every day.
Yeah.
It's never a steady state at this point.
Yeah, it's as adaptable as humans are. We are creatures of comfort and of habit. So
absolutely.
This whole thing is upending the way of life. What about over at the?
I think obviously uncertainty has always been something that was very challenging for us, as Ariff had mentioned. Like, if we knew what was going to happen 3 months from now, then we would have acted very, very differently. But I think for the hotel side, I think our biggest challenge is just competition. I think Singapore being a food hub, right, and there's just so many options out there. It's just how else are you going to be different, and how else are you going to make yourself more prominent against all the other competitions? I think for a luxury brand as ourselves, we've always took pride in the experience that we provide. But how do you provide experience? How do you provide service when you can't see them, right? When you're just literally sending food. So it's really about making sure that the food is your first priority. So how can you really show that, or how can you really communicate that your food is the best and it's a different experience, first of all? And second of all is, how do you bring that experience to the person's household? So it goes down into personalizing, right? So it's how we personalize cards or certain notes, or how, if it's somebody's anniversary at home or birthday, how can we make it extra special despite not being physically with them as well? So I think that has been one of the biggest challenges. I think it's also from a hotel, a lot of the times we do a lot of direct marketing, right? We have loyalty programs and whatnot, but now everything is, you're pretty much changing your whole entire marketing strategy. You're innovating 100% onto a digital platform, things that you might not be so familiar with, or things that might take you a month or 2 months to actually come up with a solid plan. But because everything is moving so quickly, you're literally forcing to have to innovate within 1 week, or not even 1 week. Sometimes you're given days to see how you can be ahead of the curve, right? So I think these are like one of the biggest challenges, and for our hotel side especially.
Well, earlier you spoke about delivering an experience to people at home. So Kevin, for the wine distribution arm, what are some initiatives that you guys have been doing to kind of reach out to your customers and keep them engaged?
I think for wine and I guess whiskey as well for us, a lot of the previous business and a lot of relationships that we've built and maintained have been through very direct relationships, meeting people, engaging with them, having dinner with them, and us even selling wines to restaurants, going to visit them, say hi, socialize. But now, for the past 4 or 5 months, we haven't been able to do that. And that initially was our biggest concern because a lot of our business is reliant on that. So we've really had to shift almost 180 degrees and do what most people wouldn't even dream of doing for something like wine, and basically move all communications online, virtually, even hosting tastings virtually. We've been working quite well with winemakers, with specialists in wine to host tastings for people at home. We've been able to organize deliveries to 30 to 40 people and host quite successful tastings virtually. And it's quite cool. We would never have been able to do this if there hadn't been this catalyst, in a bad way, in a good way, to really force people to try to be innovative and in how we deliver that tasting. So I think the format is obviously a little bit different. People are sitting in their own home, but the wine is there in front of them. Someone is talking about them, and everyone is engaging in some ways in a more productive and more proactive way, because you're sitting in a more kind of formal setting. But you lose a bit of that contact, the social contact you get in real life. But I think it's been quite good for us so far.
I've taken part in some virtual pub quizzes, right? And I get what you mean. Like, it's not the same as being there in person. But, I think in the case of a wine tasting, it's also nice because it maybe takes away a little bit of that formality that I have experienced at some wine tastings where I wish it was a bit more casual. So maybe doing it at home has that extra element of comfort. So on wine, Ariff, I noticed recently that there was a wine flash sale on Chope. Is that one of the new initiatives that you guys have been doing? Because I've not seen that
absolutely
before.
It is new, and it's very symptomatic of the times we're in, right? We're trying many different things besides wine. We're also doing meal kits and meal plans, and I think there's even this one page where you can buy sort of frozen produce and things like that. And it's the wine sale was actually an interesting one, because we realized that the demographic of people that use Chope tend to be sort of middle to higher. And of course, right now, when they're not going out for dinner, they're having these nice dinners at home. A number of them also looking for places to buy wine, and so we offered it, and we did this flash sale, and it went actually really even surprised us. We sold several hundred bottles over the space of a few days. And it was surprising. I mean, I don't think they're in the same caliber as Kevin's wines, and they're not the luxury rare fine wines. These are sort of in the $50 to $100 range, so more common drinking wine, but they really sold. And I think we are figuring out, as this business evolves, how to fit it into the buying journey, right? So it may be, if you order, we haven't figured it out, so don't take this as like this is what we're doing. But one idea that I've been toying around with is that when you order a meal, and after that meal you're looking for a bottle of wine, that would be a great time to suggest to somebody that here are some wines that you may also want delivered separately, that you can enjoy with your meal, especially if they're ordering in advance, right? So these are all great buying journeys, and you only have to get the user's attention once. And these are a lot of things, when we talk about adapting the product for the digital world. People often think about the food as the product, which is true, right? There's two levels of product. You want to make sure that it's presented beautifully, it travels well, it's packaged nicely. But you also have to bear in mind that the digital platform itself is an entire product, right? This is why billions of dollars have been spent on developing your Facebook, your Instagram, your Google. It's not as simple as a web page where I take a picture of my product and I sell it there. You really have to think through how the whole thing interfaces, where are the cross-sell opportunities, segmenting my users so that I know who to sell what to at the right time. These are all the new skill sets that I think traditional F&B operators have to get their heads around in this very quickly in this difficult time.
You mentioned Facebook and Instagram. So yeah, clearly social media, that's something that everyone is basically relying on these days to kind of get their word out, to reach out to the consumers. So for Nicole, Kevin, how important has social media been for you guys? It's obviously it's been helpful with Ariff.
In the past, we've used social media a little bit to create kind of promotions, to generate interest in events and so forth. But it's never really been the number one focus, because we realize that for the demographic that we are targeting, they don't necessarily look at Instagram or Facebook as an avenue for getting their product information. It's there to almost just keep them aware of our company. But since Corona started, I think a lot more people are changing their mindset, and they're more willing to use social media to find information, to buy stuff. And we've been spending a lot more time on social media, especially on Instagram. We've been engaging with a lot more people on Instagram over the past 3 or 4 months. People are asking questions through there, and I think it's a really helpful medium for getting information these days.
Yeah, I agree. And Nicole, what about you? Have you found social media?
I think social media has overtaken my life pretty much. Like, I eat, sleep, breathe, dream of social media every day, because to be honest, it's really the only way to communicate at the most cost-effective way, right? Because you won't have the luxury of advertising dollars anymore, or so social media, not just standalone, but if you're partnering with different wineries or bartenders or guests to kind of get your voice out. But I think social content also has changed a lot. Previously was a lot more on the technical front, right? When you have something, you post it and you're done with it and you move on with life. I think social media in the past 2 months for circuit breaker for us has been a lot more on storytelling, a lot more curated content. I think IG Live has also taken to become something that's very, very prominent. It's just creating conversations that are not always so forceful. Because I think if you keep talking about, let's say I have a Chinese restaurant called Madam Fan, right? If I constantly talk about Madam Fan has this, it comes to a point where it's just another Chinese restaurant, right? So how do you innovate and how do you make a difference? So you have an IG Live that talks about things that are more relatable to people who are at home, but then you kind of wiggle a little bit of a mention in. Or instead of just showing the food, you talk a little bit about the chef, how the chef had came up with this thought process for this food, or why this dish is the way it is. And it goes all the way onto beverages as well, right? So cocktails has always been a big thing, and recently there was a Singapore Cocktail Festival, but obviously we couldn't have the festival, so everything was digitalized. So how to do engagement, right? So we ended up doing virtual bar hangouts. So you can buy a package, you're making the cocktail in the comfort of your own home, you have the bartenders guiding you, and at the same time you have introduction to gin, introduction to wine, introduction to whiskey, all these different topics that kind of feels like you have a social life outside, but you still kind of at home. It's kind of creating an illusion for people just to kind of get away from the norm of them being constantly at home every day. So social media has 100% taken over my life, no doubt.
I kind of see this, this virtual world that we're almost living in now, where almost everything is happening online instead of in reality. So it's kind of interesting to look at it that way.
Yeah, we're kind of like living in a Black Mirror episode. It's kind of bizarre, when you think about it. This is becoming a new normal for us, like living in a virtual world, so to speak. So on the topic of new normal, which is a phrase that we keep hearing all the time, what do you think this new normal will be like for your industries going forward? What are some things that you guys have developed that you think will keep even after things, sort of settle down? Ariff?
Yeah, well, when I think about the F&B industry broadly, restaurants, I think many of them will continue to pursue delivery and try to diversify their revenue streams. Most restaurant groups that I speak to are terrified about the idea of this shutdown happening again and again over successive months. Everyone is already stretched so thin to the breaking point where if it happens for one more month or two, it really could cause massive collapses. So they want to create diversified revenue streams. So I don't think delivery will go away anytime soon. I know many restaurants are now worried almost in the other direction. They had quickly pivoted to spending all their time and effort on delivery. And then when dining in comes back, hopefully sooner rather than later, the challenge is going to be how to balance those two things, right? And so they're going to need to have, perhaps managing multiple platforms, perhaps trainings, perhaps they need more headcount. That's another worry, right? So I think a lot of the changes will be that the restaurants will then need to actually adopt a lot more technologies, because at this time it's just difficult to necessarily to scale up your number of workers. So I think those two trends will happen hand in hand. Firstly, we'll see a diversification of revenue streams for restaurants, and it's not just delivery, by the way. I mean, I've seen some really creative things that restaurants are doing. For example, one of our restaurants, Blue Cuisina, has set up its own grocery store, right? So they've moved upstream into selling ingredients, raw ingredients to consumers to buy, because they know that people are having difficulty finding this stuff at cold storage. So it's not just about doing traditional delivery. I know a number of restaurants have branched out into doing meal kits, meal subscriptions, so meal plans. You can order 5 days, 10 days of lunches for yourself. You don't even need to think about what to cook for lunch anymore. So those are all the creative things that restaurants are starting to do now to diversify their revenue streams. And then, as I said, hand in hand, they're going to need the technology, the online platforms, the logistics technology that handles all of that without needing extra human beings constantly answering phones, taking customer queries, all these things.
Yeah, and on that, we talk about digital tools for like restaurants. Like, are you guys doing anything with that on the B2B end? Like, how are you must be helping restaurants.
Yeah, sure. Sure. No, a big theme of what's about to happen is, as we go back to dining in, social distancing is going to become a big theme, right? So managing how queues work outside restaurants, managing table distances, managing group sizes at JW Marriott will become a thing, right? The last thing we want, and this was happening right before the lockdown, is that restaurants were getting caught and shut down because they didn't know the rules and they were violating them, right? And so what we're trying to work with is be as a responsible stakeholder in the industry, trying to connect the government authorities here in Singapore with the restaurants, acting as sort of a aggregator, to share what the regulations are, to use our technology to ensure that you can only make a maximum reservation for party size of 5, to look at your table plans and say these tables look way too close together, you're going to need to move them further apart. And for restaurants, it's not just a disadvantage, there's also an advantage here, which is previously this no-show problem, right, was something that, looking around the industry, everyone would just say, yeah, I mean, 20% of our guys don't show up for dinner on the night, but what are you gonna do? It's the industry, this is life.
Yeah.
We don't have that luxury anymore. You don't have that luxury anymore as restaurateurs. You need to do things like ensure you take deposits. We've even seen some restaurants go as far as selling their tickets, quote unquote, for meals ahead of time. So if you don't turn up, well, too bad, you've already bought your dinner for tonight. So these are steps which I think the last 2 months has been drastic for the industry, and it's very difficult for me to imagine that there's not also going to be a drastic response when we go back to dining out. It has to be both ways, right? We're going to need more from our diners too. It's not just the restaurants that need to lean in here.
It's going to be a two-way thing. Diners are going to be a bit more responsible, a bit more proactive in helping also like local businesses. So yeah, it will be very interesting to see what happens next. Nicole, earlier you mentioned about a virtual dining experience where you get the chef or a bartender to walk you through a meal. That sounds actually really interesting, and I would be very curious to try that myself. Is that something that you're gonna keep after you guys stop being
yeah, for sure. I think that's something that hotel? I think we've always wanted to do it, because if you look at more bespoke vacations, right? Like for example, resorts or safaris in Africa, they do a lot of in-room experiences, right? So you have like a 3-course candlelight dinner, on your patio, for example, or on your balcony in your hotel room. I think because Singapore has always been so close and so contained, it was always very easy for people to just go out for date nights. But I think so far with the success of the virtual dine-in experience, it has been successful to us. I think right now we will keep it, but I think it's how else we can evolve it, right? So, for example, instead of coming, eventually when our staycations are allowed, right? It won't just be a staycation where you get a room. You can actually have the virtual dining experience in the comfort of your room. So we'll we'll set up a nice table, we'll have a candlelight dinner in your room, and you can still have that kind of privacy. So I think there's a lot of things that we will not take away, as what Kevin and Ariff have said. Delivery takeaways, experiences, will kind of do that. It's just how else we can continue to integrate that when in a staycation experience instead. And I think we're looking beyond couples and celebrations as well. Right now, we're also exploring. Eventually, when events are allowed again, right? There's always going to be certain limits, right? So in phase 2, they said that you can't have a group of more than 5 people, correct? So how else can we continue that? I mean, there are some teams that are like 10 people. So how are you going to get 10 people in the same room, right? So we are looking at doing experiences in different rooms as well. So for example, Madam Fan, we have 2 private dining rooms, right? So we set up a TV in each of the rooms, and then we do the proper social distancing, but the experience is different as well. So I think it's constantly evolving and pushing the limits, but I think the next step for us, for a hotelier, would be not so much of the retail sector, but will be the business-to-business sector, the B2B sector.
And Kevin, what about you guys? Like, what is the new normal going to be like for wine?
Interestingly, I mean, on what both Ariff and Nicole just talked about, I mean, for us, we've actually been working quite closely with a lot of restaurants here in Tokyo, a lot who have decided to not open for the duration of this Corona time. And instead, what they've been focusing on is doing kind of virtual catered meals. We've been working with them to almost every week. Some of these 3 Michelin star restaurants, 2 Michelin star restaurants, and they've basically put together menus where they can deliver to anywhere for up to 20 to 30 packs, and essentially it gets assembled at the other end, and the chef will come on either a Zoom call or a WhatsApp call and talk about the food virtually while the diners are there. And the chef comes on and off, so he's not there the whole time. But it creates that level of engagement that it's been quite interesting to see, especially from our perspective where we're supporting on the wine side. And I feel that the people who chose to kind of participate in these events have an experience which it may be the new norm, but I think this whole pandemic has forced everyone to really see where the limits of acceptability is in terms of their dining experience, in terms of their consumption experience. But so far, everyone seems to really be keen to explore all these limits. And for us also, as a company, we've really tried to look at different tactics, new strategies. And for us, we're thinking actually in going forward, we're actually going to try to keep both segments, both an online focus. So basically investing in staff to really drive that part of the business, hire people who can help us on the logistics side, and also have a number of ambassadors within our group to host virtual events. Those sorts of things are things that we're working on for when things get better. But of course, the traditional part of the business for us, will still remain, because as we head back to so-called normality, I think a lot of people will want to go back to that to some degree. But it's going to be interesting to see what proportion of people really want to switch back to traditional way of consumption, I guess.
I guess at the end of the day, like, it's the human presence, the human touch that we miss the most. And also that whole novelty of being able to dress up and go out for dinner. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, this staying at home and doing Zoom calls and like eating in has never been something that appealed to me personally. But ever since you're kind of forced to do that for the last 2 months, I'm kind of used to it, and suddenly it's not the worst idea. Yeah. Okay. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have today, and I have to say it's really impressive to see how quickly you guys have all managed to like pivot and really make the best out of the current situation. It's been like a super steep learning curve for everybody, but you know what, through this is you guys are coming up with all these very cool initiatives and cool new products, and we're just very curious to see what's going to happen in phase 2 and phase 3. So thanks for joining us on today's podcast, and fingers crossed that we will all be allowed out soon and things will get better. Hopefully we can all meet in person for like these glasses of wine and cocktails that we've been talking about for the last 1 year.